Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wine Grants, unscripted chat about the unfunded, the official podcast of the Unfunded List. I'm Dave Moss, founder of the Unfunded List, and with me this week is Myles Lutheran. Say hello, Myles.
Hello, world.
Thanks for coming by the booth, Myles. And now, as is our fashion, I will read the bio that you have supplied to us out loud. Myles is a young, bearded, good-looking individual who, starting in middle school, has found himself in a number of early adopter roles, including managing a rock band on tours across the U.S., a couple real estate development projects, and a number of internet software startups in the Boston area. For the past 3 years, he's focused on building a Kenyan-based for-profit social enterprise called EFK Group, or Ecofuels Kenya, the world's first and only croton nut processing company. He would also like me to add that he is one of the world's top 3 leading experts in croton nuts, and that he is single but currently in the market. After 3 years of painfully funding his business in Kenya, with about $50,000 every 6 months, he's recently closed a $1.5 million investment round and given his company its first real opportunity to execute on the humble-sized operations and big visions they've been hard at work on. And for that reason, we're drinking a celebratory champagne this week, and we did start a little bit before the podcast. Drinking a celebratory French champagne this week, because all champagne comes from France, and because Myles and his social good nut business have finished raising the funds they need. He's here to talk with us about that and how he did it. Welcome to the booth, Myles. Pleasure to have you here.
Great to be here. Great to be drinking this champagne with you.
That's great.
This late morning.
So please, tell us about your nuts.
Yeah, so I thought, I've listened to a couple of the Wine Grants podcasts.
So you're the one.
I'm the one. I'm an early adopter,
Yeah.
as my self-written bio explained to the listeners. And so I thought what might be interesting to the infinite audience that will be listening.
We do
to
have a
this,
couple people who listen.
Hi,
Mom.
Hey, Mom. So I thought what would be interesting is our story. So I think, we've just closed this funding.
And congratulations.
Thanks so much. Yeah, definitely. A little sip there. And it's still kind of all coming into play. As not like the funding itself, but like kind of like what will come with it. Raised expectations, resources to actually start getting to work. And so I thought what might be interesting was to tell a little bit about my story, how we went from 2.5 years of basically how do we not spend too much money to make the business sink, to now what will be another 2 years of how do we put these funds to really good use. So we very small startup social enterprise, as we mentioned. We're the first company to process croton nuts, and to avoid having a whole podcast about croton nuts.
Yeah, if you could give us the short scoop on your nuts.
There's no short scoop on my nuts, but here we go. There's a nut that grows in Kenya. It grows in the forest, but farmers also plant it on their farm. And based on other people's research, there is more of this nut growing in Kenya than coffee is currently being produced and exported each year from a volume standpoint.
They got a lot of nuts.
A lot of nuts, huge opportunity. Currently, the nuts have no value. No one's doing anything with them.
Valueless nuts.
Farmers typically want these nuts off their farm. They'll pick them up, they'll throw them in the forest because they're kind of a nuisance. They sprout very easily. So I'd say like the early, mid-90s, there's some research about the oil in this nut being a direct replacement for biofuel. So a lot of biofuel projects in Africa have failed for many different reasons. We come with a kind of more full-bodied approach. We are not a biofuels company. We do sell the oil as a biofuel, but we make 3 other products out of the nut. And so we are an agribusiness, and we are not dependent on oil, large plantations. So that's why we're the first people to do this processing. And we think it's our multi-product, diverse approach that will make it work long-term.
So this is a business that will hopefully return money to your investment.
Yeah.
But the process of raising that fund is very similar to to raising funds for basically anything, right? Whether that's a just a regular for-profit that is not doing social good, or even raising money from foundations and stuff like most of our listeners are.
I would actually say it's in between the two. So we were raising for-profit investment money, but from the community of impact investors who look at early stage businesses in East Africa are very much wealthy, philanthropic, often billionaire people from the U.S. Who
it's a very similar target to most of our audience, and most of the people who submit to the Unfunded List are folks who are trying to raise charitable dollars that they're not planning to return.
It's similar. Actually, the equity investments I'm receiving are from U.S. foundations, which
exact same target often.
Exactly. So
tell us a little bit about how you did that.
Yeah, so I showed up in Kenya. I'm not the founder. The company was about a year old when I got there. But basically, just in the proof of concept, kind of entering the proof of concept stage. And something that was really core to my founder was proving profitability in the model as early as possible. And when he did his analysis, there wasn't a big amount of money that was needed for that after his initial investment. So we're talking about less than $250,000 that was really sought after to prove a very small business model, what a lot of people would consider micro business model. And then the idea was that we would prove that, run it, and then we'd be at a healthy point to plan for future growth. It was nothing about that we didn't want to be a big business or we didn't want to, our model is we want to replicate across East Africa, small factories or medium-sized factories, just because transportation is so expensive. So we had a simple plan. We wanted to execute on that plan, and we wanted to then think about, big picture vision. So for about 2 years, I would say, we never really sought to raise an amount that was more than $150,000. And
a year.
To get to that stage where we could say, look, this is healthy model, and we can then go and plan the next stages of different regions, different countries.
You wanted to prove it at a lower level,
exactly,
and then raise the larger funds.
Yeah, and it wasn't even
seems reasonable.
Very one of my current investors describes us as nickel and diming ninjas. And we definitely had to do that to make this work over the last 2 years. So,
so do a lot of people. This is a very common tale you're telling.
So, a lot of early stage investing, I guess you would say, our plan that was very small, sought to prove this at a very early small size, didn't go the way we thought it would. We basically thought over optimistically, which is something also now I can humbly say is very common to early stage entrepreneurs or early stage anyone really doing something like this for the first time. The projections don't go to plan, and the small amount of money you thought you needed is not enough. What we didn't really plan for was anyone to be fundraising full time, or what I now know is a 9 to 12 month fundraising process. And we essentially had.
And this is what you do there?
That's what I became doing because we had such a need. We had 3 months of money in the bank. So we go for about a year with this very high need for a small amount of money. And I go to an event in Kampala, Uganda, called the Unreasonable Institute, which is a spinoff from a more popular, bigger institute in Boulder, Colorado.
I know those dudes.
Social entrepreneurs.
Daniel and Teju.
Great guys. The team in Kampala is also great. So one of my realizations at this, for me, this was a chance to step back from the day-to-day, we need money tomorrow, and really think bigger picture. They have a couple big business model shifts, mindsets, changes at this institute, but one of them is also that funders are just plainly not interested in the small amount of money that I'm asking for. So, which is it's a little bit ironic, but there's a lot of good reasons for it. It takes a lot of money to do the due diligence for projects, especially if you're a U.S.-based person, kind of on the side investing in Africa. There's a lot of legal work to make sure that your U.S. foundation is not at risk for things like terrorism and stuff, which is...
Sure, yes.
So there's costs to all these things. And at the same time, you really don't. The last thing you want is for that project to be underfunded. So in our scenario, we totally are responsible. We did this. We asked for a small amount of money to do something very small. We didn't make it. We needed money right away, but at that point, we didn't have the time to raise more money. We didn't have so we were basically like, it was more or less like we had shot ourselves in the foot in a lot of ways. The investors who gave us that small amount of money were like, well, we still really like what you're doing, but now we're questioning your ability to make projections, to execute, because we had such a ambitious, short-term, optimistic plan. So we essentially, with the same exact business, same exact vision, same exact model, go with a couple of shifts from kind of like my bigger picture thinking. We go back to the drawing board to create this plan that funders will want to fund. And I don't say that in a cynical way. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs come to this realization that your investors are customers of yours. And the market for these investors was very much pointing towards something close to each investor, usually they have the cutoff of around $250,000 minimum. This is very well published in the social enterprise space. Acumen and other organizations kind of publish.
You're trying to fund a business that's going to do something real. You have a large amount of funds.
Yeah.
I would imagine you might not want to spend time on nickel and dime ninjas.
Exactly. There's a lot of assumptions that come with the small model. That's you don't have a big vision, you're not really ready to handle big money, which in our case I don't think was true, but that was everyone's impression. When I told people that I wanted to raise $100,000, the typical response was, we really like what you're doing, but come back to us when you're ready for bigger money. Without even looking at the model in a lot of cases. We come back, create a new plan for a bigger fundraise, about $1.2 million, and we set out on this journey. And one of the other, sorry, we got cut off. One of the other realizations I had is that a lot of funds have 250 minimums. That's kind of their expectation, but a lot of them also don't want to invest alone. So you start, 2, ideally 3+ investors in a round is ideal. You start getting to a minimum that's close to $1 million. So we rethink the business, and after this period of time for us as a very cash-strapped business, there was a lot of things we knew we weren't planning for right. We wanted to do better, and money is needed to do that. So the end of 2014, about 2-3 months after I go to the Unreasonable Institute, we have this realization. We have a fundraising plan for just over $1 million. We start to execute on that. We still have a more urgent need, and we get very fortunate to meet some very key, influential, smaller investors that help us get to these next stages. And we find I feel like a lot of entrepreneur stories that I've both heard from firsthand and read about, there's an element of luck, and I think we definitely have some in our story. So that comes to mind, and we end up raising in just a short period of time. As far as it all coming together, we closed an investment round for $700,000, and we get an $800,000 grant issued to us. And
that's real money.
That is real money.
That'll buy a lot of valueless nuts.
Well,
I think it's worth having another toast to that.
Thank you very much.
Very nicely done. I think a lot of the I think back to when I was a fundraiser, and I heard a lot of the same things. Had a lot of the same experiences that you just went through. And I actually think one of the hardest things to do, especially when you're going to a foundation or some sort of institutional group to try to raise money from them, an individual is much different. But when you're going to an organization or a group of investors or something like that, deciding how much to ask for is often difficult. A lot of the nonprofits I was with, we could have spent as much money as anyone would give us, right? It's not like we only need this amount, right?
Right.
There's I think a little bit of fear on both ends of asking for the wrong amount, and it just seems to me like a weird little dance.
Yeah.
And that should really be funder led. You try to do work, you need funds for it. You obviously want as much money as they're going to give you. That's obviously true. Every single fundraiser wants as much as you'll give, right?
Yep.
And then they still have an application form that says, well, how much are you asking for this project? Right. You have to decide, I want as much money as you're willing to part with. That's obviously the answer. But you still have to, come up with, and then justify why you're asking for that amount. It's weird. So I'd love to hear how you came across and how you found success in that.
I think the biggest challenge for us, despite this whole period of time, wasn't necessarily like, I mean, it was, we were asking for a small amount of money. There's not a lot of people who want to only think about that small amount of money. But I think I would say the bigger challenge was funders who weren't directly honest with us. In that same regard. I had a lot of, and to be honest, like, impact investing is fairly new. A lot of these funds are just a few years old as an organization. They've only made a few investments. Like, I don't know if they even know this themselves in some ways, but like, as far as like to the point where they can come straight to us and say, these are exactly what we'll look at. This is the timeline we'll definitely take. This is what our board will finally approve or not approve. But I just think that was the biggest problem. I can, obviously I won't name anyone, but like, I've even had conversations with some of these people after the fact. Like, I probably have 4 to 5 investors who wasted months of my time.
Yep.
And eventually said no for reasons that I would make a strong case that they could have pointed out right away.
Yep.
And that was like, that was the
Absolutely.
most soul, not destroying, but soul,
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been in rooms where decisions about funding took place, boardrooms and other places with groups of people making collective decisions.
Yeah.
And it has been, and I've done my best to try to be the voice of, because I've also been, I was a development assistant and a development associate at nonprofits. I was doing I think a lot of philanthropists have been fundraisers, but it's usually like they chaired a committee or something. Yeah. Like I went into an office every day and did this stuff, so I really understand how much time goes in. Yeah. And a lot of people don't have, a lot of funders do not have that perspective, and as a result have very little empathy for it.
And I even so I say that like thinking like I feel like, to be fair, like the people that come to mind for me are like, a lot of them are really new, and a lot of them like are foundations who are just kind of dabbling into investing, and it's a different game.
I don't think anyone does it like these people are doing social good. Let's waste their time. That though is the result that's happening with a lot. Whether it's it's interesting to hear you talk about that with impact investors who are. To me, I've never sought funding from an impact investor, but I've seen them. I was at SoCap a few weeks ago, and got to watch a lot of them in action, and I'm pretty familiar with that universe. They seem to me to be more efficient and more concerned with efficiency than right. There's obviously a lot of things that are more efficient than them, but more efficient than foundation folks with how they decide to do their grant making. There is like very little concern over how much time they're wasting. Yeah. It's a big part of the reason why we have the unfunded list is because of that. You can spend. We had a guy in yesterday who I used to work with, Michael, and we worked on a number of large proposals for large amounts of funding. We successfully brought in, Michael and I, close to $75 million together while we were at the Seed Foundation. It was
should we toast to that?
It was good. So we helped build the Seed School of Maryland, and the first class of 6th graders who started there at the school that Michael and the team and I built. They graduated this last May, and they're all going off to college.
It's exciting.
That is it's a real cool. Like, I don't even know these kids. I think if I think real hard about it, I probably remember some of them, but it was a long time ago, right?
I was. Part out. You remember all of them.
Yes, I remember all of them. They're wonderful, and I wish them the best of luck. Right? No, I do. They're and every single kid in Baltimore and throughout the state of Maryland and throughout everywhere ought to be able to have a good school to go to. And that's why it was fun to do that project. Yeah. But we had gifts come. We were fortunate in that we had a lot of large gifts come in. We had a commitment of $15 million from an individual to start us off, and a couple $5 million gifts, and then some foundations came in, several of them at similar levels.
So I'm actually interested to interrupt you to ask you a question.
Please.
Did you have a budget for that?
How do you mean?
So like, at least in the impact investor space, like, you can't ask for money unless you can have a budget that.
We had
a $100 million budget, and people were putting in pieces of it.
So this has been a while, but let me explain how we framed that capital campaign.
Yeah, totally.
Our goal was to raise $57 million. We had a lot going for us. The main thing we had going for us is that the city of Baltimore, sold us Southwestern High School for $1. So. We already owned the property.
That's exciting.
We had already built a school in D.C. that was operating and running well, so they had reason to Like, we weren't just some guys. Like, can we buy this old school? Right? Well, and actually, the copper in the school was worth well over $1. And shortly after we bought it, someone found that out and got in there and took that copper off our hands.
That's a separate podcast.
But the total amount we needed to build the school was way more than $60 million, more like $120 million.
Yeah.
And we had a really great finance guy there named Dwight Crawford, who's still working there, I believe.
Yeah.
He came up with got a couple banks to agree to do some finance stuff I don't understand. I believe the word bridge loan.
It's a buzzword.
I somewhat remember the word bridge loan, and so the initial giver, Mitch Rails, had given us. He said, I'll give $15 million, but I want you to leverage that. So tell people that I will match gifts of $1 million or more.
Yeah.
So, and he was like, this guy, he's like the 100th richest person in the country, and he has his own helicopter. And so we had a couple times where he would like helicopter in to meet with someone to convince them to match his $1 million gifts. And it was a lot of fun. We did, that was really cool. And we raised the money in the schools there.
Awesome.
So for some of those individual gifts, it was just about like getting Mitch on the helicopter and getting them to show up there, and like a couple meetings.
I'd say the same for me. So like, in this mindset that like it was the end of 2014 that we like made this shift in what we would ask for, and this business model to kind of go with that. And that's very much like the investor is also a customer of sorts. Obviously not the main customer, we're a business.
Right.
But something else that was a huge reason for the success that we had in this round was I came to the U.S. in April, May, and I spent 6 weeks flying to about 5 or 6 different cities purely to meet investors. And like I'm very fortunate that I'm part of a network called Unreasonable, we spoke about.
Yeah, that must be helpful.
Also a network called Village Capital. So like these people helped me get to the right seat on this trip.
Yeah,
but,
getting to the right seat is such a huge step in the process.
But I mean, like you think, so we're so happy it worked out, right? But a lot of small enterprises in Kenya, whether they're run by expats or local Kenyans, can't afford or even get the visas to do what I did. I flew to the U.S. I flew to 6 different cities. It was probably $5,000 by the time that trip was over, and it resulted in a lot of money coming in. But to put up that upfront money for something that at the time was completely uncertain, but now I can appreciate that value. Prior, like we were in Kenya, not even Nairobi. A lot of people come to Nairobi. It's a very hot spot for this kind of stuff. But we're 3 hours north of Nairobi, so we'd have people who would come to Nairobi.
Is it like a nice drive or scenic?
I think it's a nice drive, but when someone hears 3 hours, they're like, I'd rather just not. So, investors who we would really hope, especially during this 2-year period where we needed anything that someone would give us, we would hope that they would make the trip. And what I ended up learning over probably about an 8-month period is that people would force that trip to happen in a day, 3 hours up, a few hours there, 3 hours back. They were miserable sitting in the hot Kenyan sun in a car in traffic to get out and into Nairobi. And so I've actually stopped telling people they can do a one-day site visit, and I tell people you have to plan overnight. You have to come up one day. Where like it's still technically possible, but yeah, there's this whole like it's almost a psychological thing, and it's not cynical. It's like you just need to be of a mindset where you have the time and the patience and the focus to really digest what we're doing. So meet us in person, get to know us, have a nice dinner, go to sleep relaxed, wake up the next morning, finish the site visit. And it's expensive and it's time consuming, and a lot of companies this highly buzzed about social enterprise scene, a lot of companies have people who live full-time in the U.S. just to fundraise.
Yes.
I don't want to do that. I hope we don't. I don't think we will, just because I'm already saying that and we just raised a bunch of money. But it's like I feel like there's one investor from the Unreasonable Institute that comes to mind who, giving us a presentation as a group of 12 entrepreneurs, said to us, you shouldn't spend more than 5% of your time fundraising. And I felt like I almost laughed out loud in that classroom. And I was like, you're joking, because one of you guys is going to make me spend 30% of my time. So I mean but that again,
It's fascinating. They'll say, and again, they don't. I don't think he's not like nefariously
Of
like
course.
That's the best wisdom he has access to, and I
Yeah.
think I'm really fortunate that I spent time at the. I'm not like I was on a couple of different fundraising teams early in my career where I was in the bottom rung of the fundraising team, and so I know, and I was development coordinator or whatever my title was. Right, I knew what was going on everywhere. I knew how much time everybody was spending on everything.
Yeah.
And I've also been. I talked about when so Russ Finkelstein, who we had
Love him.
we had on the podcast, and I'm sure Russ is a dedicated listener.
I hope so. I'm doing this because I think Russ is.
Because I'm hoping that Russ will listen to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I told this story when he was on the show. I'll give you the abridged version. I had a really well-known funder. Who runs a very large foundation. He gave me and a group of other young philanthropists a training on how to say no. And I was excited for it.
Yeah.
Because as a fundraiser, I hadn't really gotten. I didn't like how folks said no. Usually they don't. They usually you just don't hear from them.
Yeah.
And so I was really like, this guy knows what he's doing. He's been a professional philanthropist.
Yeah.
He was the president of this. He was not the funder himself, but he worked there.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm like, this guy's going to tell, like, this is going to be useful because I have no idea how to say no to somebody in a productive way. I hadn't the first clue about how to do it.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping he'd come in there and talk about how to give the feedback and stuff.
Yeah.
And his presentation wasn't about how to say no. It was about how to get the people you don't want to fund to stop bothering you.
Yeah.
How to say no in a way that gets them to not ask any more questions.
Yeah.
Because in his universe, that's what he has to do. He doesn't have time to deal with the people he isn't funding, and that's just an unfortunate reality of that system. And I think if you can get away with spending 5% of your time on fundraising, that's great. Do that, right?
Yeah.
And probably like next time you meet with this guy, tell him, hey, look, I'm only spending 5. Like tell him, just lie to him and say you're only spending 5% of your time.
It's actually
that's what they want to hear. I don't even know what to do.
It's already happened
that
a little
kind of
bit,
mindset.
like because we now are okay for a while. Like I actually tell people, no, we're not looking right now, and I avoid a lot of waste of time. But I feel like we're running out of time. I feel like we both know.
Don't worry about it. We play it nice, fast and loose here.
But I feel like
on the
there's
podcast.
such a great wisdom that like can kind of sum this all up, and you just kind of hyped on it, pointed on it. Teju from Reasonable, who we both know, awesome guy. I think he's written blogs or even given maybe a mini TED talk about this. But
well, we'd love to have Teju in the booth sometime if you're listening.
Yeah, let's
next tour DC, Teju, we'll have you in here.
So
whatever kind of wine you want on me.
He points to an idea which is very helpful, and I think you have to be in a certain place to receive it and actually implement it. But no is the second best answer is essentially the idea. So you want to get to yes, of course, with any funder who's going to fund you, but like the faster you can get to no, the better, and like.
You get to stop wasting time once you get that.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, I feel like I am keener at that now. I don't really know. Like, I'm not an expert. No one can ever fully be because a lot of it depends on the funder. But if funders could, kind of adopt this better and, it hurts people's feelings, like, especially entrepreneurs, like, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit entrepreneurs, like, they are very emotional about what they're doing. They care a lot. They're passionate. Like they're probably still not.
Everyone in the universe is passionate about this. No one's doing it as in a blasé type.
So but at the end of the day, like the faster you say no, you rip that Band-Aid. Whatever analogy you want to make, like the faster, the better. And I think that's happening in the social enterprise space, impact investing. I hope it happens more faster. And I think it will. I think there's a lot of very exciting developments as far as like. More new funds, more funds becoming more aware of what they've been doing for a few years. I'm even scheduled right now to meet with someone from USAID in Nairobi when I go back next week, purely because someone else who met me wants me to tell this person about my experience and my views on this. And like that, just the fact that like someone from USAID wants to hear this is great. Like
This is good.
Yeah.
That is encouraging.
Yeah, so-
No, and there are a lot of passionate funders out there who are interested in learning and getting better at it, which is great. The Unfunded List is here to try to fill in some gaps in the meantime for those folks out there that are struggling with some of the same things you are, and who have been perhaps rejected and don't know why, and are from somebody who was just trying to get them to go away.
Right.
We've got a great evaluation committee together, ready to look at your proposal, give it our best shot, try to help save some time so you can, like Myles has been able to do, finish his fundraising and roll up his sleeves now and get to work. You're going to have to actually do some actual work now. God bless you with that.
Let's have one final.
That's one final toast. This is
champagne.
this is the you are also congratulations, the recipient of the largest wine grant ever given in Unfunded List history. We normally find a reasonable bottle of red or white or whatever, but this is real champagne from France we're drinking.
Yeah.
Thanks again. Congratulations.
I think I'm
again.
worth it. If I
Yeah,
get
no,
started
it
out
was
there.
more than worth it, and I got to drink some of it too.
Yeah, some of it.
As always, I want to thank our host, The Lookout DC, which is a beautiful co-working community for filmmakers located in the Adams-Morgan neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and good luck with your funding.